Hello and welcome to my blog, The 21st Century Learner by Jo Harris. So who is my learner? Well, my learner has multiple learning styles, multiple intelligences, multiple modalities and preferences within those modalities of visual, kinesthetic, auditory and auditory digital. And so the learner is very complex and diverse, and they require a strong foundation of literacy, numeracy and problem solving, and being able to access vast information and synthesize that down to what they need is such a skill for the future adult of tomorrow. Can't help but think of my learner about what is technology to my learner, because I know that for a child who has gone with computers and iPads and the internet, it's not technology, it's just the way that the world is. Whereas for me and my generation, this is all technology. And I also feel very envious of this learner of today because they get to benefit from the scientific research of the brain plasticity. Because the latest scientific brain research is really highlighting how we learn, and there's a link there to Edutopia, Dr. Judy Willis's talk on multiple intelligences and brain research, which was fascinating. And she showed me that it's so important that I, as a teacher, understand how my students learn for student engagement so that I can get through the RAS system, which Dr. Judy talks about, and gets the child or the student, who she likens as the fox, out of survival mode, which is if they're in survival mode, they're just going to fight you, fly away from you or freeze, and get them through that high volume of information that's coming into each student's brain. Every minute there's a high volume of information. So how do I make sure that my information that I'm trying to portray to this child so that they can learn is part of that information that's getting through to the brain processing centers for lifelong learning. And it's all about respecting that fox brain. And it's about getting the student into what is new, novel and different, Judy talked about. And ways that you could do that is, as a teacher, is using costumes, music, advertising a presentation or a new subject matter that you're going to be talking to, pictures, movement, and linking it to the student's personal goals, their prior knowledge. And so that's scaffolding their knowledge and their personal interests and creating that friendly, safe environment so that they're ready to learn. And this is all about helping me as a pre-service teacher develop pedagogically sound strategies. So ways that I picked up out of Dr. Judy's talk was to personalise every 10 minutes, saying bring it back to what is the learning intent here, what is your personal learning goal? And a strategy you can do that with is Hear Me Now. Gaining learner feedback. I love the idea of using a little whiteboard to check in to see, particularly me as a maths teacher, all the thumbs up, thumbs down, if they've got it or not, and pairing them up so they can learn socially. And then having brain breaks every 10 to 15 minutes, because the neurotransmitters in our brains are depleted after 10 to 15 minutes, so particularly dopamine. So if you can't keep flogging a dead horse is the analogy that I think of, that I need to give the kids brains. And I know I get that dopey kind of feeling as well, where I start to zone out. And it's because the neurotransmitters can't transfer across the dendrites, so they need a break to replenish. And using visualization strategies and stories, kids love stories, and in fact marketing in business is getting into storytelling as a new way of selling. So what are the barriers to learning that Judy talked about that resonated with me? Well, if kids believe that they can't learn, they're not going to learn. If they don't value learning and their peer group says school sucks, then you're going to have a battle there. You need time to learn because it's complex, and I need to get to know each learner because there's such diversity in the classroom in their learning needs, difficulties and disorders at both ends of the spectrums, from the gifted and talented through to the physical disabilities that I might encounter. And there's cultural diversity, as particularly if English is a second language, and defining moments, peer pressure. If you got pounded down by a teacher in front of the class and made you feel like a fool, as I have a vivid memory of being done to me as a child in grade 6, then, it creates a negative, you don't have a strong desire to go back to school. And you need to make sure, and I need to make sure that the kids that I'm creating a safe environment, that it's comfortable and stress-free so they can get on with the job of learning. And I can't help but think as well that there is a generational disconnect. And I read a story last year, and I wish I could remember the source, but it was about that the first time in history, in human history, this is one of the first time where there's a real generation gap. And that's because traditionally, the elders teach the youth the skills and tools that you need to survive in this world. And they would hand down the trade to us so that we could then, become them in the future. But the first time in human history, and the rate of change is so great that the youth, who technology, as I said before, is not technology, it's just the world, are having to teach the elders these basic life skills. Having internet is to me is now, it's not a want, it's a necessity. And that, particularly for teachers of a generation that view technology is something that feels very foreign to them, they're not going to bring it into their classroom. And Judy talks a lot about the plasticity of our brain, which I think is so exciting, because it tells us that our brain, it's not fixed. We're not laid down in concrete, that change is possible. And to me, that tells me that it's a very exciting time to enter this profession, because it really builds on that analogy that our mind is a garden, which Tony Robbins talks about, and it's really up to us to pull out the weeds and nurture what we want to grow in our brains. So what are the applications for the real world out there and me going into schools? Well, with technology, it's the availability of it, and it's actually working, and then I have a backup plan, that the classroom layout facilitates use of technology, that there's I understand the skill level, and that it's integral to learning, and that's what Sir Ken talks about. It's about fostering that creativity in the students and the 21st century learner. And that as a teacher, I really need to make sure that I have strong currency of my skill, that I stay abreast. And because my role is to be, I see it as a collaborator, in the ideal world, a facilitator, a creative, and technically literate, so that and hopefully the curriculum will enable us to, because I still haven't got my head around that, to prepare students for jobs that currently don't exist. And particularly what springs to mind as an example is like a YouTuber, like some of those young kids that my kids subscribe to, they've got like 10 million followers. Now, they would be making a nice little income from advertising on their YouTube account. And also there's the freelancing I see on sites like Odesk or Elance, where you can outsource. To me, I see that as a huge growth industry. But the downside of that is that you're competing on a dollar cost per hour with someone in Africa, for example. So, it's going to have big implications on people's earning capacity. And that it is safe to be wrong, which is what Sir Ken talks about. And my role, I see that I'll need time to prepare, particularly as a new teacher. So that's it. Thanks for listening this week, and stay tuned for my next one.